one. I've got an absolute gem to share with you today. A 1967 Pontiac Firebird convertible that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $8,000. Now, I'll be straight with you, this beauty needs some TLC. But man, what a fantastic project car for the right person. Let's dive into the details. This Firebird is rocking its original factory maize paint job, which was redone at some point, and it's got that sweet deluxe trim and those classic wheel covers. The body's in great shape, no dents, no damage, and no filler. Some parts have been replaced with quality stuff, like GM steel front fenders and a new floor. Under the hood, you've got the original 326 engine that's been remanufactured, with only 10K miles on it since the rebuild. The two-barrel carb has been rebuilt too. It's currently sporting a 4-speed Muncie transmission, but the original 3-speed Saginaw comes with the car if you're a stickler for originality. Now, I've got to be honest with you, this Firebird isn't ready to hit the road just yet. The seller's been upfront about some issues. The pedal assembly is sluggish, and there are some braking problems that need addressing. The interior could use some love, and the convertible top needs to be installed, but a new one comes with the car. But here's the thing. This is a one-owner vehicle with a clean title, and it comes with all the factory manuals and some spare parts. The odometer shows 57,400 miles, but it has rolled over, so keep that in mind. Look, I know $8,000 might seem steep for a car that needs work, but think about the potential here. This Firebird has been mostly stored and garaged, run regularly, and has a strong engine and drivetrain. With some elbow grease and dedication, you could have an absolute stunner on your hands. So, if you're looking for a rewarding project and want to breathe new life into a classic piece of American muscle, this '67 Firebird could be your ticket. The current owner is 84 and says he's done his part. Now it's time for a new enthusiast to take the wheel and finish what he started. 2. We're taking a look at a sweet little piece of 80s muscle, a 1985 Ford Mustang GT convertible that's currently up for grabs at $11,000. Now, I've got to be real with you folks, this isn't a perfect show car, but it's got a lot going for it. Let's break it down. We're talking about a GT 5.0 with a manual 5-speed transmission. That's the good stuff right there. The seller says it's got 79,000 original miles on the clock, which isn't too shabby for a car pushing 40 years old. They're describing it as a nice driver, which usually means it's in decent shape for regular use. Now, I've got to be straight with you. The seller mentions it needs a piece of trim painted. They've got the part, but it's not done yet. So there's a little cosmetic work to be tackled. But hey, that's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, right? The listing is a bit light on details, but the owner says, "Lots done," which could mean recent maintenance or upgrades. It'd be worth asking for more specifics there. The title's clean, which is always a good sign. At $11,000, it's not exactly a bargain basement find, but for a GT convertible with relatively low miles, it could be a solid deal if everything checks out. The seller's open to trades too, so there might be some wiggle room on the price. Look, this Mustang isn't perfect, but it sounds like a fun driver that could be a great weekend cruiser or a starting point for a more serious restoration. If you're in the market for an 80s Mustang with that classic 5.0 rumble, this one might be worth a closer look. Just make sure to give it a thorough inspection and maybe a test drive before you commit. Remember folks, in the world of classic cars, a little elbow grease can go a long way. 3. We're diving into a real gem from the late 70s luxury scene, a 1979 Lincoln Continental Mark V that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,650. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average old boat. This Lincoln's got some serious class. First off, let's talk mileage. The seller claims this beauty has only 43,000 original miles on the clock. For a car that's over 40 years old, that's practically nothing. It's like this Continental has been sleeping for decades, just waiting for the right owner to wake it up. Now, I've got to be straight with you. I haven't seen this car in person, but the seller's description is pretty enticing. They're saying it's in beautiful condition, with great original paint and body. And get this, they claim there's no rust. That's a big deal for a car of this vintage, especially if it's been in California its whole life. Speaking of California, this Lincoln comes with a clean CA title and those coveted original blue plates. That's a nice touch for the collectors out there. Under the hood, you've got the classic V8 engine, paired with an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive. Exactly what you'd expect from a luxury land yacht of this era. The seller mentions it runs and drives great, which is always good to hear. One feature that really catches my eye is the power sunroof. That was a pretty fancy option back in '79, and it's cool to see it's still there and presumably working. Now, I always advise caution when buying any used car, especially one this old. While the seller's description sounds great, you'll definitely want to see this Continental in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over before you commit. At $8,150, it's not exactly cheap, but for a well-preserved piece of American luxury with low miles, it could be a solid deal if everything checks out. Just imagine cruising down the boulevard in this white beauty, sunroof open, living your best '70s luxury life. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation, they're time machines. So if you're in the market for a slice of late '70s opulence, this Lincoln Continental Mark V might just be your ticket to ride. 4. We're taking a look at a real piece of American automotive history. A 1967 Plymouth Valiant that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $3,150. Now I've got to tell you, this little A-body has got me all kinds of excited. Let's dive into the details. We're looking at a blue sedan powered by the legendary 225 Slant 6 engine. This bulletproof power plant is paired with a 3-speed manual transmission on the column. Talk about a fun, old-school driving experience. The seller mentions it's got manual brakes and steering too, so you're really going to feel connected to the road in this baby. Now I've got to be straight with you. This isn't a low-mileage cream puff. The odometer shows 160,651 miles, but it's rolled over, so we're talking about a well-used car here. But don't let that scare you off. The seller says it runs and drives great, and all the lights, heater, and gauges are working as they should. That's a good sign for a car of this vintage. One of the best things about this Valiant is that it's been cared for. The seller mentions newer upholstery and carpet, with door panels and headliner in good condition. They've also got a book of receipts and maintenance records. That's music to any classic car buyer's ears. The seller's been using this as a weekend driver, which tells me it's in roadworthy condition. They say it cruises awesome, and I can just imagine how cool it must feel rolling down the street in this piece of '60s Americana. At $3,950, this Valiant seems like a pretty solid deal for an entry-level classic. It's not perfect, and it's certainly not a show car, but it sounds like a great driver that you could enjoy right away while slowly fixing it up over time. Remember, folks, cars like this Valiant are more than just transportation. They're a connection to automotive history, a conversation starter, and a fun weekend project all rolled into one. So if you're in the market for a cool, affordable classic that you can actually drive and enjoy, this '67 Plymouth Valiant might just be your ticket to ride. 5. We're diving into a real piece of American automotive history, a 1962 Ford Galaxie 500 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $5,000. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks. This one's a bit of a project, but it's got some serious potential. Let's break it down. We're looking at a white Galaxie 500 with the beefy 390 engine under the hood. The seller says it's an all-numbers matching car, which is always a big plus for collectors. They claim the odometer shows 32,000 miles, but it's rolled over, so we're dealing with an older, well-used vehicle here. Now, I've got to be honest. This Galaxie's got some issues. The seller's been upfront about them, which I appreciate. There's a transmission fluid leak from a line connected to the pan, and the power steering is leaking too. The battery's relatively new but doesn't hold a charge. These are all fixable problems, but they're going to need some attention. On the bright side, the seller mentions that lots of work has been done on the car, and there's a picture detailing all the repairs. The frame is reportedly in great condition, and there's only minimal rust on the body. That's pretty good for a car of this age. The Galaxie does run and drive, but given the leaks, the seller recommends picking it up with a trailer. That's probably a smart move if you're serious about taking this beauty home. At $5,000, This Galaxy 500 isn't exactly cheap for a car that needs work, but it could be a solid starting point for a restoration project. These early 60s Fords have a great look, and with the 390 engine, it's got potential to be a real cruiser once it's fixed up. Remember folks, cars like this are more than just transportation, they're time machines and pieces of history. If you've got the skills, time, and a bit of cash to invest, this 62 Galaxy could be a rewarding project. Just make sure you go in with your eyes open about the work it needs. So if you're in the market for a classic Ford project car and aren't afraid of a little or a lot of wrenching, this Galaxy 500 might be worth a look. 6. We're diving into a truly unique piece of automotive history, a 1969 Plymouth Fury convertible that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $4,200. Now buckle up, because this isn't your average classic car. Let's start with the basics. We're looking at a 69 Fury convertible with a rebuilt 318 V8 under the hood, paired with a resealed 727 TorqueFlite automatic transmission. The seller's done some nice upgrades, including an Edelbrock aluminum manifold and 4-barrel carb, electronic ignition, and a new distributor. It's riding on Hurst alloy wheels with new tires, and it's got power Imperial bucket seats. Fancy. But here's where things get wild. This Fury isn't just a car, it's a rolling piece of art. Apparently, it was created as an art project by dozens of student artists, some of whom are now well known, and professional artists. The entire body is covered in hand-applied acrylic paint with a brushed clear coat, featuring intricate designs and unbelievable detail. It's been featured in newspapers and displayed at museums and art walks. Talk about a conversation starter. Now, I've got to be straight with you. This Fury isn't perfect. The seller's been upfront about a few issues. There are some minor dents and dings, a dented bumper, and a couple of non-working gauges. It's got a shimmy at highway speeds that might need an alignment. The convertible top needs work. The motor runs, but the lines and fabric likely need replacing. Oh, and the left rear window is missing, but there's a replacement in the trunk. On the bright side, the seller says it runs very well, starts right up, and runs cool. They also mention there's no rust, which is always good news for a car of this vintage. At $4,200, this Fury is priced pretty reasonably for what it is, a running, driving piece of automotive art with some needs. It's not for everyone, but for the right person, this could be an incredible find. You could keep it as is and enjoy its unique artistry, or strip it down and restore it to original specs, though that would be a shame, in my opinion. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're expressions of creativity and culture. If you're looking for a truly one-of-a-kind classic that'll turn heads wherever you go, this 69 Fury art car might just be your ticket to ride. 7. We're diving into a real gem from the early 80s, a 1982 Buick Riviera convertible that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $12,000. Now, let me tell you, this isn't your average Riviera. We're talking about a seriously rare bird here. First off, let's talk rarity. The seller mentions that only 1,248 of these convertibles were built in 1982, making this a pretty uncommon sight on the roads today. They were a pricey option back in the day, coming in at about $10,000 over the standard Riviera coupe. That's some serious coin for the early 80s. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. This Riviera is sporting a 307 cubic inch V8 engine, paired with an automatic transmission that's reportedly in great shape. It's a front-wheel drive setup which was pretty innovative for a big American car of this era. One of the most impressive things about this Buick is the mileage. The seller claims it's got just 6,500 miles on the clock. That's incredibly low for a car that's pushing 40 years old. They say it's always been garaged, which explains the good condition of the undercarriage. The seller's done some recent work too. We're looking at a new AC compressor, new air shocks, and a new convertible boot. That's good news for anyone looking to cruise in comfort. Now I've got to be straight with you. At $12,000, this isn't a cheap car. But for a rare low-mileage convertible from this era, it could be a solid deal if everything checks out. The seller mentions they have the owner's manual and service records, which is always a good sign for a classic car. One thing to keep in mind, while this Riviera is cool, it's not everyone's cup of tea. The early 80s styling can be polarizing, and these aren't exactly known for their performance. But if you're into unique, comfortable cruisers from this era, this could be right up your alley. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're time capsules. This Riviera is a snapshot of early 80s American luxury, and with its rarity and low miles, it could be a great addition to any collection. Just make sure to give it a thorough inspection before you commit. So, if you're in the market for a rare piece of Buick history that you can actually drive and enjoy, this 82 Riviera convertible might just be your ticket to ride. 8. We're diving into a piece of 70s Americana, a 1974 Oldsmobile 88 convertible that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $3,000. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks. This old Olds is definitely showing its age, but it could be a fun project for the right person. Let's break it down. We're looking at a big old convertible with a 350 cubic inch V8 under the hood, paired with an automatic transmission. The seller says it runs and drives good, which is always a plus for a car of this vintage. They've done some recent work too. New radiator, new plugs and wires, and the brakes are reportedly in good shape. The tires are said to be great, and the registration is current with a clean title. Now I've got to be honest, this Olds has some issues. The seller's been upfront about them, which I appreciate. The AC isn't working, and the convertible top won't go up and down. A few of the back windows don't roll up either, but hey, at least the heater works. The biggest concern here is the rust. The seller mentions lots of heavy rust around wheel wells, which is pretty common for these old boats, but definitely something to be aware of. The paint is faded on top too, so this isn't exactly a show car. On the bright side, the odometer shows just 64,555 miles. Now, on a car this old, there's always a chance it's rolled over, but if those are original miles, that's not too bad. The seller describes it as a cool beach cruiser that gets lots of thumbs up, and I can believe it. These big 70s convertibles have a certain charm that's hard to resist, even when they're a bit rough around the edges. At $3,000, you're not getting a pristine classic here, but you are getting a running, driving piece of automotive history that could be a fun weekend cruiser or a starting point for a more serious restoration. Just be prepared for some work, especially if you want to tackle that rust. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're time machines. This old Olds might need some love, but with its V8 rumble and drop-top style, it's sure to bring a smile to your face every time you fire it up. So if you're in the market for a project car with some 70s flair, this 74 Oldsmobile 88 convertible might just be your ticket to ride. 9. We're taking a look at a sweet little piece of 70s Americana, a 1973 Dodge Dart that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $4,900. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks. There's a bit of confusion in this listing, but let's break it down and see what we've got. First off, the seller's description says it's a 1972 model, but the title of the ad says 1973. Either way, we're looking at a classic Dart from the early 70s, and that's pretty cool in my book. The seller describes it as stunning, with a sleek tan paint job that looks fresh. They also mention a beautiful interior to match, which is always nice to hear for a car of this vintage. Under the hood, we've got the dependable inline-six motor. Now, these aren't powerhouses, but they're known for their reliability and decent fuel economy. The odometer shows 140,000 miles, or 142,000 according to the description, which is pretty reasonable for a car approaching its 50th birthday. One thing that caught my eye is that the seller lists it as front-wheel drive. That's definitely an error. Darts were rear-wheel drive, so keep that in mind. It's got an automatic transmission, which is great for cruising. The seller mentions it's been garage kept, which is always good news for older cars. They say it runs and drives good, but as always, you'll want to check it out in person and maybe get a mechanic to look it over before you commit. Now, I've got to address the keywords section at the bottom of the ad. It looks like the seller's trying to cast a wide net, mentioning brands and features that don't apply to this car. That's a bit misleading, so keep that in mind when dealing with this seller. At $4,900, This Dart isn't the cheapest classic out there, but if it's in as good condition as the seller claims, it could be a decent deal. These Darts are simple, sturdy cars that can make great entry-level classics. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're time machines. This Dart might not be the flashiest muscle car of its era, but it's a solid piece of everyday Americana that could be a fun weekend cruiser or a starting point for a more serious project. So, if you're in the market for a classic Mopar that won't break the bank, this 73 or 72 Dodge Dart might be worth a look. Just make sure to do your due diligence and check it out thoroughly before you buy. 10. We're diving into a real fixer-upper, a 1980 Chevy Corvette that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $5,400. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks, this isn't your typical Craigslist find. We're talking about a serious project here. Let's break it down. This yellow 80 Vette is a coupe, and it's definitely seen better days. The seller is upfront about it being a project car that needs assembling. That means you're not driving this baby home. You're probably going to need a trailer. Now here's where things get interesting. The original numbers-matching engine is gone, replaced with a 1992 Firebird LT1 350 V8. That's actually a pretty sweet upgrade in terms of potential power. But here's the catch. It's not running. The seller mentions a fuel flow issue, so you've got some wrenching ahead of you to get this heart beating again. On the bright side, the engine only has 44,000 miles on it, which isn't bad at all. The seller also mentions they've gathered many new parts and the best used parts they could find. That could save you some hunting, but you'll want to get a detailed list of what's there and what's still needed. A couple of positives. The battery and rear tires are brand new. Hey, it's something, right? Now, I've got to be honest. At $5,400, this isn't exactly cheap for a non-running project car. You're going to need some serious skills, time, and probably more money to get this Vette back on the road. But if you're handy with a wrench and have always dreamed of bringing a Corvette back to life, this could be an interesting starting point. Remember, folks, projects like this are not for the faint of heart. You're not buying a car here, you're buying a challenge. But for the right person, there's nothing more satisfying than bringing a classic back from the brink. So if you've got the skills, the space, and the patience to tackle a serious Corvette project, this 1980 model might be worth a look. Just make sure you go in with your eyes wide open about the work ahead. 11. We're diving into a real piece of 1980s Americana, a 1985 Dodge Diplomat that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $3,900. Now, let me tell you, this isn't your average old sedan. We're looking at a true time capsule here. First off, let's talk mileage. This Diplomat has only 57,000 miles on the clock, which is incredibly low for a car pushing 40 years old. Even better, it's a one-owner vehicle that's been stored for much of its life. That's the kind of provenance that makes us classic car lovers weak in the knees. Under the hood, we're likely looking at either the 3.7-liter Slant 6 or the beefier 5.2-liter V8. The seller doesn't specify, but either way, you're getting that classic American powertrain paired with a 3-speed automatic transmission. It might not be a powerhouse by today's standards, but it's got that old-school charm we all love. Now, I've got to be straight with you. The Diplomat isn't exactly the most exciting car of its era. These were often used as fleet vehicles, police cars, and taxis. But that's part of what makes this one special. Finding a civilian model in this condition is like stumbling upon a unicorn. The seller claims everything works and that it runs and drives with no issues. They've recently changed the oil and filter, and the tires are reportedly in good shape. It's got a clean title and is ready to go, which is always nice to hear. At $3,900, this Diplomat isn't the cheapest 80s car out there, but for a low-mileage, one-owner example in excellent condition, it could be a solid deal. These cars are known for their durability and simple mechanics, which makes them great for folks who like to wrench on their own rides. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation, they're time machines. This Diplomat is a perfectly preserved slice of mid-80s American automotive history. It might not turn heads like a muscle car, but for the right enthusiast, it's a real gem. So if you're in the market for a unique, well-preserved piece of 80s nostalgia that you can actually drive and enjoy, this '85 Dodge Diplomat might just be your ticket to ride. Just imagine cruising down the street, feeling like a detective from an '80s TV show. 12. We're diving into a real piece of American luxury, a 1968 Cadillac DeVille that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,500. Now, let me tell you, this isn't just any old boat. We're talking about a slice of late 60s opulence on wheels. Let's break it down. This DeVille is rocking the massive 472 cubic inch V8 engine. That's 7.7 liters of pure, unadulterated American muscle, folks. It might not be the most fuel-efficient power plant out there, but it'll certainly get this land yacht moving with authority. The seller says the car is in good shape and runs great, which is always good to hear for a vehicle that's over half a century old. They've done a front disc brake conversion, which is a smart upgrade for a car of this size and weight. It should make this big caddy stop a lot better than it did when it rolled off the assembly line. Now, I've got to be straight with you. The seller's description is pretty brief, so there's a lot we don't know about this DeVille. They claim it's in excellent condition in the listing details, but describe it as good in the text. The brown paint looks decent in the photos, but it's hard to tell without seeing it in person. The odometer shows 96,000 miles, which isn't too bad for a car of this vintage. These old caddies were built to last, so if it's been well maintained, it could still have plenty of life left in it. At $8,500, this DeVille isn't exactly cheap, but it's not outrageous either for a running, driving classic Cadillac. These cars have a presence that's hard to match, and with their smooth ride and spacious interiors, they can make for great cruisers. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're time machines. This '68 DeVille is a rolling testament to an era when American luxury cars were all about size, comfort, and style. Just imagine cruising down the boulevard in this beast feeling like $1 million. So, if you're in the market for a classic luxury car that'll turn heads wherever you go, this '68 Cadillac DeVille might be worth a look. Just make sure to give it a thorough inspection and maybe a test drive before you commit. 13. We're diving into a real piece of early '70s muscle, a 1972 Pontiac Luxury Le Mans that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $12,000 or best offer. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average Le Mans. We're looking at a well-documented survivor with some interesting upgrades. Let's break it down. Under the hood, we've got the original 400 cubic inch V8 engine paired with the original TH400 transmission. That's a potent combination that should give this Lehman some serious get up and go. The odometer shows 121,651 miles, but it's rolled over, so we're looking at a well-used but still kicking classic here. Now I've got to be straight with you. This Lehman's isn't perfect. The seller's been upfront about some issues, which I appreciate. There's some bodywork needed, including rust bubbles on the driver's side door and fender, bubbling under the vinyl roof, and a small dent in the quarter panel. The driver's seat shows some wear too. But hey, that's not unusual for a car approaching its 50th birthday. On the bright side, the seller says it runs great and has a new battery. They've upgraded from the original 2-barrel setup to a 4-barrel quadrajet carb and intake, which should give it a bit more oomph. It's also got a 1976 Trans Am front sway bar, which is a nice handling upgrade. One of the coolest things about this Le Mans is the documentation. The seller has all the owner's documentation, service records, and receipts since 1981 in digital format. That's a goldmine for any classic car enthusiast. At $12,000, it's not the cheapest Le Mans out there, but for a numbers-matching car with good documentation and some desirable upgrades, it could be a solid deal for the right buyer. Just be prepared to do some work to get it back to its former glory. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're time machines. This '72 Le Mans is a rolling testament to an era when American muscle cars ruled the roads. Just imagine cruising down the boulevard in this beast, that 400 V8 rumbling through the Thrush glass pack. 14. We're diving into a real piece of automotive oddity, a 1982 AMC Eagle SX4 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $2,350. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average classic car. We're talking about one of the earliest crossovers ever made, and in a rare 2-door configuration to boot. Let's break it down. This brown beauty is rocking the Iron Duke 4-cylinder engine, paired with a manual 4-speed transmission. That's a combo you don't see every day, especially in an Eagle. The odometer shows 100,834 miles, which isn't too bad for a car pushing 40 years old. Now, I've got to be straight with you. This Eagle needs some love. The seller's been upfront about the issues, which I appreciate. The transfer case needs rebuilding or replacing, so the 4WD isn't currently working. The carburetor needs attention, and it's missing a radiator, tires, and a battery. It'll start but won't idle, so you're not driving this home under its own power. But it's not all doom and gloom. This Eagle's got some serious potential. It's a rare 2-door model with a manual transmission, which makes it a unicorn in the world of Eagles. The body's straight and rust-free, which is a big deal for a car of this vintage. The paint and interior are described as fair, and it's an unmodified, complete car with a clean title. At $2,350, this isn't the cheapest non-running project car out there, but for a rare, complete Eagle in restorable condition, it could be a solid deal for the right enthusiast. Just be prepared to put in some work and probably more money to get it roadworthy again. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're pieces of automotive history. This '82 Eagle SX4 represents AMC's innovative spirit and their attempt to create a new market segment. Just imagine cruising down a dirt road in this thing once it's restored, showing off its unique blend of car and SUV DNA. So, if you're in the market for a truly unique project car that'll turn heads and spark conversations wherever it goes, this '82 AMC Eagle SX4 might be worth a look. Just make sure you've got the skills, patience, and garage space to tackle a serious restoration. 15. We're diving into a real piece of late 50s Americana, a 1959 Ford Galaxie 500 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $6,900. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average old Ford. We're talking about one of the most iconic designs of the fabulous 50s. First off, I've got to address a couple of things in the seller's description. They mention it's front-wheel drive, which is definitely an error. The '59 Galaxie was rear-wheel drive. Also, the odometer reading of 8,100 miles has rolled over, so we're looking at a well-used classic here. Now, let's talk about what makes this Galaxie special. It's packing a big V8 engine. The seller doesn't specify which one, but these could come with anything from a 292 to a 352 cubic inch V8. It's paired with a 3-speed automatic transmission, which should make for smooth cruising. The seller says it runs great and is good for highway driving, which is always nice to hear for a car of this vintage. This Galaxie is loaded with power options, power brakes, power steering, and even a power seat. That's pretty fancy for 1959. The seller describes the interior as nice, which is a good sign for a 60-plus-year-old car. Now, I've got to be straight with you. The description is pretty brief, so there's a lot we don't know about this Galaxie. The seller says it's in good condition, but without more details or clear photos, it's hard to judge the true state of the car. At this price point, you should expect some wear and tear, and possibly some issues that aren't mentioned. At $6,900, this Galaxie isn't the cheapest '59 Ford out there, but it's not outrageous either for a running, driving example with some desirable options. These cars have a presence that's hard to match, with their long, low stance and those iconic gull-wing fins. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're time machines. This '59 Galaxie is a rolling testament to an era when American cars were all about style, size, and power. Just imagine cruising down the boulevard in this beast, feeling like you've stepped right out of a '50s movie. So, if you're in the market for a classic '50s cruiser and don't mind potentially dealing with some old car quirks, this '59 Ford Galaxie 500 might be worth a look. Just make sure to give it a thorough inspection and maybe a test drive before you commit. 16. We're diving into a real gem from the '60s, a 1967 Chevy El Camino that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $6,000 or best offer. Now let me tell you, this isn't your average classic. We're talking about the perfect blend of muscle car and utility vehicle. Let's break it down. This El Camino is packing a 327 cubic inch V8 engine, which is a sweet power plant for these cars. The seller says it's a numbers-matching vehicle, which is always a big plus for collectors. It's got an automatic transmission, making it easy to cruise in, and it's showing 70,000 miles on the odometer. Now, whether those are original miles or not, we can't be sure. But it's not a crazy high number for a car of this vintage. One of the coolest features of this El Camino is that it's got factory air conditioning. That's a pretty rare option for a 67 model and definitely adds to its value and comfort. Now I've got to be straight with you. This El Camino isn't a turnkey cruiser at the moment. The seller mentions that it's been broken down, which likely means it's partially disassembled. They bought it all assembled, so it seems like they might have started a project and didn't finish it. That means you're looking at some work to get this beauty back on the road. The description is pretty brief, so there's a lot we don't know about the condition of the body, interior, or mechanical components. The seller says it's in good condition, but with a project car like this, you'll definitely want to inspect it thoroughly or get more details. At $6,000 or best offer, this El Camino could be a decent deal if everything checks out. These cars have a strong following, and a numbers-matching example with factory AC has the potential to be quite valuable when restored. Remember, folks, cars like this are more than just transportation. They're pieces of automotive history. This 67 El Camino represents a unique era when muscle car performance met pickup truck utility. Just imagine cruising down the strip in this beast once it's back together, turning heads with its classic lines and rumbling V8. So, if you're in the market for a classic project car with tons of potential and don't mind getting your hands dirty, this 67 Chevy El Camino might be worth a look. Just make sure you know what you're getting into and are prepared for the work ahead. 17. Let's dive deeper into this 1964 Mercury Monterey that's currently listed on Craigslist for $12,500. As someone who's passionate about classic cars, especially those hidden gems on Craigslist, I've got to say this one really catches the eye. The seller describes it as being in excellent condition, and from the details provided, it's hard to argue with that assessment. Let's start with the heart of this beauty. A completely rebuilt original V8 390 engine. With only 3,000 miles on the rebuild, you're looking at a power plant that's just getting broken in. This means you can expect reliable performance with that classic V8 rumble we all love. The automatic transmission paired with rear-wheel drive is quintessential American luxury from the 60s, offering a smooth, comfortable ride. The exterior has been treated to a new paint job, which really brings out the iconic lines of the Monterey. Inside, you'll find new upholstery, so you're not dealing with worn-out seats or cracked dashboards. One of the standout features of this model is the breezeway electric rear window, and it's fully functional on this car. That's a rare find these days, and a real conversation starter at car shows. Being a California car, rust shouldn't be an issue, which is a huge plus for any classic car enthusiast. Rust repair can be a nightmare, so starting with a solid body is a major advantage. The clean title is another point in this Monterey's favor, ensuring you're not dealing with any hidden legal issues. Now, $12,500 might seem like a significant investment, but in the world of classic cars, especially for one in excellent condition, it's actually quite reasonable. The seller mentions they've lowered the price and are open to offers, so there might be some room for negotiation. For anyone looking to get into classic car ownership or add to their collection, this Mercury Monterey presents a compelling opportunity. It's a piece of automotive history that's been well maintained and restored, ready for its next caretaker to enjoy. Whether you're planning to use it as a weekend cruiser, a show car, or even a daily driver, this Monterey seems up to the task. In the realm of Craigslist car finds, this 1964 Mercury Monterey stands out as a prime example of why it's worth sifting through countless ads. It's not often you find a classic in this condition at this price point. For the discerning classic car enthusiast, this could be the perfect chance to own a slice of 1960s American automotive luxury. 18. We're looking at a 1971 Plymouth Fury that's up for grabs at $4,150. Now let's be real here. This isn't a pristine show car, but it's got character and potential for days. The seller's being straight with us, which I appreciate. They're moving and can't take this big old boat with them. The interior's holding up pretty well, but there are a few quirks. That rear driver's side window's got a mind of its own, rolling up crooked, and the dash has seen better days with some cracks. But hey, for a car pushing 50, that's not too shabby. Now let's talk body. Those rear quarters have some rust. Classic Fury problem, no surprises there. But the good news? The subframe and floors are solid. No deep rust to worry about, which is a big win for a car of this vintage. Under the hood, we've got a rebuilt 360 with some nice upgrades, 340 heads, a performer intake and carb, and dual exhaust. They've even thrown in a new gas tank. The carb's been rebuilt but needs some tuning. It's got a bit of a hesitation at quarter throttle, but hey, that's part of the fun of owning a classic. Always something to tinker with. This Fury's been a summer daily driver in the past, so it's not just a garage queen. It runs, drives, and stops. Like a couch on wheels, as the seller puts it. I love that description. It's been getting some neighborhood cruising action lately to keep everything loose, even though the plates are expired. At $4,150, you're not getting a perfect car, but you are getting a solid project with good bones. It's a chance to own a piece of American automotive history without breaking the bank. Sure, it needs some love, but that's half the fun with these old cars. If you're looking for a classic cruiser that you can drive and improve over time, this Fury could be your ticket. It's got that unmistakable 70s vibe, a decent powertrain, and enough quirks to keep things interesting. Just be ready to roll up your sleeves and show it some TLC. For the right person, this could be the start of a beautiful friendship. 19. We've got a real piece of 1970s Americana here, a 1973 Mercury Marquis that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $4,500. Now, I've got to be straight with you folks. This isn't just any old boat from the 70s. This is a slice of automotive history with a side of intrigue. Let's break it down. We're looking at a two-door model, which is already a bit rarer than your standard four-door land yacht. Under the hood, you've got the mighty 429 cubic inch V8 with a 4-barrel carb. That's a lot of muscle for cruising down the boulevard or hitting the highway. Power steering and power brakes? Check and check. And for those sweltering summer days, you've got air conditioning to keep you cool. The seller reports 84,000 original miles, which is pretty low for a car pushing 50 years old. They're calling it a good runner on regular gas, which is music to the ears in these days of high fuel prices. The blue paint gives it that classic 70s vibe, and the clean title means you're not buying someone else's paperwork nightmare. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The seller throws in a little historical tidbit, mentioning that Jimmy Hoffa was last seen in this model year car. While that's not exactly a selling point, it does add a layer of mystique to this already intriguing ride. But wait, there's more. The seller is also offering a spare engine, a high-compression 429 4V from a 1969 LTD with the trailer pack option. We're talking 350 horsepower here, folks. That's a serious power upgrade if you're looking to give this Marcus some extra oomph. Look, I've got to be honest with you. At $4,500, you're not getting a concours-ready show car. The seller describes it as in good condition, which in classic car speak often means it's a solid driver with some wear and tear. You'll probably find some issues that need addressing, but that's part of the charm of owning a classic. For the right buyer, this Mercury Marquis could be a fantastic project. It's got good bones, a powerful engine, and enough 70s style to turn heads at any car meet. Whether you're looking for a weekend cruiser, a unique daily driver, or a canvas for restoration, this Marquis has potential in spades. So if you've got a soft spot for 70s luxury cars and don't mind putting in a little elbow grease, this Mercury Marquis might just be the ride you've been waiting for. Just remember, with great power comes great responsibility, and probably a hefty fuel bill. 20. We've got a real gem on our hands today. We're talking about a 1936 Chevy Master Deluxe that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $10,000. Now let me tell you, this isn't your run-of-the-mill pre-war car. This baby's got some serious upgrades that make it a unique blend of vintage charm and modern drivability. First off, let's talk about what's under the hood. This Chevy's sporting a 3.8L V6 engine paired with a GM 3-speed transmission. That's not the original powertrain, folks, but it's a smart upgrade that gives you reliable power without sacrificing the classic feel. And here's a little nugget for you hot rodders out there. The bell housing on the transmission is ready to accept a V8 if you're looking to really wake this old girl up. Now, the seller's been busy with some serious modernization. We're talking tilt steering, rack and pinion front end with disc brakes, and a GM front and rear end with a modern 5-lug setup. Power brakes are also in the mix, making this 36 stop as well as it goes. The seller reports that it starts right up, stops as it should with no issues. Music to any classic car lover's ears. Inside, things are looking pretty good. The interior is in good shape with a complete headliner and seats, though it does need carpet. All the glass is there, which is a big plus for a car of this vintage. The seller's honest about a few needs. The doors need some adjusting, and there are a few odds and ends needed. But overall, they're calling it a great car in cruising shape, and I'm inclined to agree. On the outside, you're rolling on new bias ply-wide white wall tires, giving this Chevy that perfect period look. And here's some more good news. There's no major rust mentioned. For a car pushing 90 years old, that's pretty impressive. Now, I've got to be straight with you. At $10,000, this isn't a fully restored show car. But that's not what it's trying to be. This is a driver-quality classic that's been thoughtfully upgraded to be more usable in today's world. The seller's right when they say it's offered at a fraction of the price of other competing cars from this era. For the right buyer, this 1936 Chevy Master Deluxe could be an absolute steal. It's a chance to own a piece of automotive history that you can actually drive and enjoy without breaking the bank. Whether you're looking to cruise as is or have a solid foundation for further customization, this Chevy's got potential in spades. So, if you've been dreaming of owning a pre-war classic but thought it was out of reach, this might just be your ticket to the dance. Just be prepared for some tinkering. But hey, that's half the fun of owning a classic, right?